no one's a one man or one woman show. It's a team. So I think that that's why it bothers me so much that culture is so overlooked and people don't think about it because they don't generally associate it with it doesn't drive revenue. Like there's things that are more important, but little do they know it's affecting everything.
Welcome to It Comes Down to This. Today's guest is Olivia De Girolamo, a franchise operations and marketing expert who's helping brands scale by strengthening the foundation behind the storefront. I invited Olivia on the show because she understands what it takes to grow a franchise the right way, from empowering owners and operators to aligning teams on the big picture. In this episode, we unpack the unseen challenges of franchising, the delicate balance between brand control and local autonomy, and why operators' success always comes down to clarity, connection, and consistency. In today's episode, it comes down to this. Scaling a franchise isn't about more locations, it's about stronger partnerships.
Welcome, everybody, to The Marketer again. It's awesome to have you back. I know you're going to have an amazing time listening to this episode. In this episode, we're going to be uncovering the hidden power of workplace culture and how it can make or break your career. We'll dive into even the best strategies that can fail if company culture is toxic. So I know we probably all experienced that in some way, shape, or form. But today, my guest, Olivia, say it for me again, Olivia.
De Girolamo.
De Girolamo. Is that not an awesome name? Today, we're going to be digging into this topic a little bit. And so, Olivia, it is awesome to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Hey, Olivia, can you share with me a little bit about your journey into the world of franchising and home services? Let's just set this up a little bit for the audience.
Yeah. So I'm currently with a company called ServiceMinder, and we are a CRM for home service brands. And prior to my role, I've been with ServiceMinder for about 3 years. Didn't know anything about the franchising space. I was in the cosmetic industry for a little while. And if you asked me anything about franchising, I would have said, I don't know, Chick-fil-A. Like I had no idea what a Z or a Zor was. But I wanted something drastically different from the cosmetic industry. And like many others say in the franchising space, they just kind of stumble upon it. You're either born into it or you just stumble upon it and then you become obsessed. So that's where I'm at right now.
I don't have experience in franchising. And the great thing about this show, in my opinion, is it's called The Marketer, but that's actually not about me. That's about all of the people that I bring onto the show. And your guys' experience and backgrounds is what I'm trying to portray on the show and help people learn through different things. So, what was your impression when you stepped into franchising industry, and how did that differ from your previous jobs?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, I wanted a drastic change because of today's topic, because of the culture in the cosmetic industry. And I was very pleasantly surprised by the franchising space because all I really knew was the culture of the cosmetic industry. And the first week that I started my role at ServiceMinder, my boss wanted me to just kind of like dive right in. So he encouraged me to sign up for what we both thought was a webinar about franchising and learning about IFA, the International Franchise Association, what it means to be a part of it, and basically all the things that I still needed to learn that I did not know anything about. However, it was a virtual roundtable with franchise experts in the community. So here I am, a little bit over 48 hours in my role at a round table, and everybody, you go to a round table to learn from each other, bounce ideas off of each other, talk about your challenges in the franchising space. And obviously at that point in time, I had nothing to add to the table to bring to the conversation. And I remember showing up and I'm like thinking in my head, like, oh my gosh, like based on what I know in my past, like people are going to be almost irritated that I'm here. Like, why are you here? You know nothing about franchising. And when I introduced myself and said, sorry, I know you guys are all very senior. Everyone introduced themselves, 20 years experience, owned this franchise, now a supplier, whatever it was, resumes that were all in the franchising space. And I told them, I am here to learn. I don't know anything yet about franchising. So I really am so sorry. I have nothing to bring to the table, but I'm looking forward to listening to everybody. And the response that I got from the franchise community and that instance, I knew right away, like, this is a very different community and a great community to be a part of. They were almost, they were excited that I was there. They're like, oh, a new person, great opportunity to learn. We can't wait to teach you. It's great to get an outside perspective, like such a positive welcoming with open arms. And that was just so refreshing. And in that moment, I really knew, like, wow, this, I'm in the right place. And the culture, not only at ServiceMinder, which I quickly picked up on, but in the franchise space in general, was just awesome. And I was really happy with my decision. So,
Given the fact, Olivia, that culture is so important to how we feel about our jobs, how we feel about our creativity, and it really does affect, how you think at work. Can you walk me through some time in the past where culture, while you had a great one coming into what you're doing now, everybody was very positive and encouraging to you, and that, definitely sets the stage. Was there a time in your life with your previous jobs where that wasn't the case? And specifically, how did it affect you personally and mentally?
yeah. So I would say that when I joined the workforce, it was in 2020, which was a really, obviously, a rough time for everybody. And I had internships all throughout my college experience, but that's totally different. You're not a full time employee, you're treated a little bit differently anyway, no matter how involved you are. So it was, I didn't have anything to compare it to. So what I now know is toxic culture, I thought back then was just normal. Like, work life balance isn't a thing. You're supposed to answer emails when you're on PTO. If you really want to succeed, if you really want to show your commitment, you're so lucky to be here. And I did feel I was really lucky to be there because it was 2020 and a lot of people didn't have jobs. So it was a little bit of like a weird time. But after spending a few years in the workforce, I started to realize, like, this is not normal. Like, I should be, there is room for work life balance. And just overall, like, if you see a lot of turnover and stuff, like, that isn't normal. And if there's only one or two people in the organization that I like to call culture cheerleaders, and you don't align with the majority of the people in your organization, that is usually a red flag. So I would say that it started to change my perspective of, yes, I love what I'm doing, but it got to the point where we're human beings. If we don't align with the values of the people around us and our leaders, it's going to affect your motivation, your output, your career path, all of those things that are kind of like the basics to being a good employee are impacted by the culture that's around you. So I realized that culture should be prioritized, and it took me a little bit because I had nothing to go off of again. But once I was in that mindset of, oh, so there is, the grass can be greener on the other side. This, all jobs don't have to be like this. Whereas I thought that that was the case. So there's not like one specific instance, but I would say after a few years of going through that, it finally just clicked, and you do start to see the downfall of companies that don't prioritize culture.
I really appreciate and agree with what you said in there, that if you don't match up, if you would, with the values of the leadership that you work with, that can be extremely challenging. Um, and it can, and that can be around anything, right? It's not necessarily their own personal values. It could be the values of what they want to do with the company and where they want to go with the company. It can be around whether or not you should be working on PTO. You can have a hard driving um, boss that it's normal for them to work, over PTO. It's normal for them to take vacations and take their laptop along and be spending 2 to 3 hours a day doing work while they're on vacation. And then those people, it can be normal for them to expect that their entire team does that as well, and that you're just basically always on. And when you're in a culture where you have to be always on, that tends to be extremely draining. And a lot of times you don't even realize how draining it can be until you're fully drained. And then, what you're left with is, I got to go find someplace else to work. But I also know, that it's not really a topic that's discussed a lot during the interview process, right? And I think that's the failure on both sides. As people that are hiring, are you discussing what your culture is like, what you're going to expect of the people that you're bringing in, from a culture standpoint? And then for us, going and applying and looking for different, career choices, are we afraid to ask? You know, Tell me about your culture. Tell me what your expectation is around PTO. Do I have to be always on, or does leadership give me the freedom to be able to decompress when I'm not supposed to be? I think those are really valid questions that people should be open to, don't you?
I have a love-hate relationship when people say you don't really know the culture until you're there, which is true because everybody could technically lie. It goes both ways on interviews, but there is ways to ask really questions with intention and questions where they can't just say yes or no. Like, don't just ask, do you prioritize culture? That's an easy, of course we do, like try what I like to do is in an interview, you will usually talk to more than one person. If you're only talking to one person, that's a whole other thing. That's a little bit of a red flag because no matter what role you have, you're not just working with one person unless it's literally a one person company. But you should be meeting with multiple people who you will be working closely with, cross collaborating with. So you should be asking them all the same types of questions about culture and comparing their answers. So, do they have core values? If they have the core values, you should ask them what they are. And if they haven't presented them to you, you should say, how do you enforce if one of your core values is being collaborative, like how do you enforce that on a daily basis? How do you make sure like all your team members align with that? Because it's very easy for people to lie and say, yeah, our culture's great, we're one big family, but then not say exactly how they're enforcing it and why their culture is so great. So
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's if you ask somebody a closed question, they're going to give you a closed answer, right?
yeah,
You know,
they're hoping you probably do.
exactly. You have to ask open-ended questions that give them the opportunity to explain.
Right.
Just like what interviewers are doing to the people that they're interviewing. They want to get them talking, and they want to get them, to have an understanding of where they're at. But what's your thoughts about that word toxic? Uh, I know it gets thrown around a lot, when we're talking about workplace, and you can have a positive workplace or you can have a toxic workplace, right? How do you define that? What should people look for, um, when they're evaluating their own culture?
Yeah. Um, I mean, obviously, toxic looks different to other people, and there is a scale. But I would say that red flags to me are, I call it the pizza party effect. Like, if you see that your culture is, you know, people don't interact with each other, the team isn't getting along, projects are falling apart because no one's driving the initiatives, really just all of like the people problems that we all run into. And if you think that putting a band-aid on a bullet wound and throwing a pizza party is going to solve everything, it's just not. So I feel like we see that a lot. Like people, leaders will see that no one wants to show up to the work happy hours, or people don't know anything about each other's personal lives, and no one's humanized in the company. And they think like, okay, great, so we just have to do like one team building event and it will solve all these problems. But it's so much deeper than that, but also simple at the same time. Like, for example, like remote workers, we don't get to, we're a remote company and we don't really get to see each other. We do like one big annual meeting a year. And it's hard, but it's also like it takes work to stay connected. But it's simple things like greeting everybody in the morning on Slack, saying, hey everyone, great, like hope everyone has a great Friday, to saying goodnight at the end of the day. I hope everyone has a great, like little things like that that go such a long way, where it's not just all work talk. We also on Slack have like a hashtag random channel where we'll put like memes, and when people get engaged or have babies, like that's the place where we kind of like congratulate everybody. And that's our water cooler conversation. So it doesn't have to be these like grand things. Like, obviously having a culture committee, that's great, but not everyone has the resources for that. So like start simple and just genuinely like get to know the people on your team, get to know the people on other teams, and humanize everybody. I would say that that's like the biggest thing.
I would tell everybody, just to piggyback off that, if you're in a situation where you feel fear or despair on a regular basis, you're in a toxic culture. And that toxicity, if you would, creates those fears, creates that despair. It may be that you're afraid of somebody's response. It may be that you just don't feel like you can be successful. There's just so many ways, and I totally agree with what you said. It's defined by everybody differently, and the level of what you can such put up with, if you I should say, is different for everybody as well. But um, one of the things when I was talking to you about this episode, you made a statement that is going to be the title of the show. You said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I thought that was just fantastic. Can you explain that?
Yeah. I mean, it's at the end of the day, like I said earlier, we're humans. And all of the basic things that will make you a successful employee, a successful team member, are your motivation, alignment, teamwork. So if you don't have a strong culture, if it's the opposite of those things, like opposite values, zero alignment, zero communication, how you could have the best strategy ever, but you're never going to execute if you can't. It's like no one's a one man or one woman show. It's a team. So I think that that's why it bothers me so much that culture is so overlooked and people don't think about it because they don't generally associate it with, it doesn't drive revenue. Like there's things that are more important, but little do they know it's affecting everything. It technically is affecting revenue. So and from like a marketing perspective too, I think that it's great for employee prospect marketing. Like it's a natural thing. Word of mouth marketing for new employees. The younger generation, culture is so important to them. So do you want a bigger talent pool that is interested in working for you because you have a great culture and it shows, and you have testimonials that you didn't have to ask people to write Glassdoor reviews for you. They genuinely did it because they love working there. So I don't know, things like that go a long way. Like thinking just in the future, it's crucial.
Do you have any examples of where a company's strategy failed because the culture wasn't strong and it wasn't strong enough to support it? Do you have any past experiences like that?
I
or just some examples from other companies that you've seen.
I don't have specific examples, but I will say that obviously an effect that I've seen in my previous roles, um, high turnover rates of employees, that in general has obviously that impacts strategy because it puts a lot of things on hold. You have to, redistribute responsibilities. So that was one of the things that I saw a pattern of that in my past roles, that it took us, it was always like 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, because it was leadership that was leaving and then teams combining and things changing. So high turnover was not it that would just be, a more of a generic example, but yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, let me share with you one of my own examples. So I once worked at a company. Um, I was the head of marketing for this company, and the owner was a person who took all kinds of videos and pictures all the time on his phone. And he got to the point where he wanted to have all of his personal things, and it was mixed in with some business things, basically cataloged and put into an iTunes library, if you would, for different stages of his life and different categories of events and so on and so forth, right? Well, guess who got that project? Me. So we actually had to hire somebody. It had nothing to do with business. It's just a personal pet project. And so we had to hire somebody to take thousands upon thousands of pictures and videos and stuff and categorize them and add notes to them and make sure that the metadata was correct and all this stuff. Took months, months. Well, when we talk about uh, how your values should line up on paper and what was said when I took the job, the values very much lined up with what I believe, right? And um, in actuality, how he ran the company was with an iron fist of fear. And everybody around him, you could just watch them. They would just some people would start like shaking when he walked into the room because they thought they were going to get yelled at that day. And so we had this project and it took months to complete. And then on the day we were going to go up and present it, the head of IT took all of those files and decided he was going to transfer them to another drive, another disk, so that they weren't lost, right? Or so nothing would happen to them. Well, he plugged his one drive in to the computer and he plugged the new drive into the other side of the computer. And guess what happened? He formatted the drive that we had completed. In a sense,
Oh my gosh.
wiping out months worth of work.
Oh my God. I'm so
Now,
sorry. That is
no,
tragic.
imagine the feeling, knowing that you work for somebody who uh, ins- basically drives his company with the state of fear, of now having to go up to the conference room and sitting down and telling that person, hey, we wiped away months worth of work. Now, all of his stuff wasn't lost because that was backed up into cloud stuff, but all the organization, all the stuff that we were doing for months was gone. It
Wow.
was it was crazy. It was crazy. And true to form, exactly what you would expect would happen. I mean, the top just blew off of the building.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and I
sorry.
was gone very shortly after that.
Uh, yeah.
So, culture plays a huge role.
The fact that you brought that up, that's, as marketers, which I'm sure all the listeners and you totally understand this, like, we can't perform well in fear. I mean, I don't think many people can, but marketing, especially because we need that creative freedom and the opportunity to bring ideas to the table. If you're living in fear and you don't align with the people around you and you're almost like scared to bring anything up, like how can you really thrive as a marketer? You're never going to be coming up with new ideas. You're just going to, follow the lead and just, do whatever what they want to do, the bigger picture. But that's a really good point from a marketing perspective. Fear is a bottleneck if you don't feel like you can. And that was a big thing for when I joined ServiceMinder. Something that attracted me to the role is not only like the culture in general, but the culture when it came to marketing. Like this is your department. Like you can build it from the ground up, and we give you free range to, really learn about franchising and bring it to life, bring our marketing department to life. So
This has been really great, Olivia. I want to close this out with one question. So, both of us now having been part of what we would call a toxic workplace, and now that you're in a really good, situation where you're supported, you're encouraged, and you're free to express your creativity in all kinds of ways, what advice would you give to the person who has been either sitting in a toxic workplace, trying to figure out what they can do, what they can change, or if they can change it, and maybe somebody who is looking to avoid getting into a toxic workplace? What advice would you give those people?
for someone that's currently in a toxic workplace listening to this and it feels like a support group and they feel very heard, I would say that's something, it's not obviously it's definitely harder if you're more entry level and not in a leadership position, because I do believe that culture should start at the top and trickle down to everybody. Like you should be setting an example at the top. But that doesn't mean that you should still try to make that difference. Do your research, bring light to the fact that so we work with Franchise Business Review, which is a survey in the franchising space, an employee satisfaction survey. We do it every year at ServiceMinder. And a little fact that they shared with us this year is that if you feel like your manager cares about your success, you're 3 times more likely to refer job candidates. You're 4 times more likely to stay with the company. So little facts like that you can bring to your leaders and say, hey, like this is what we really need to focus on. We can do X, Y, and Z. And you can start off being the culture cheerleader and have a cheerleader with you, like start recruiting people, bringing things to light. And obviously like that can be that's easier said than done. But if that's not possible, then obviously looking for a new role is the next best thing, and following the steps that you and I talked about in the interview process would be your best bet.
I would add, protect yourself. There's money's money. It can come from all kinds of places. Make sure you're getting it from a place that you feel supported, that you're free to engage your creativity and, have the best experience, not only for yourself, but for those around you. And the other thing that I would say is there may be some people that are listening to this, and I would have one little caveat. Make sure that you're not the toxic component of the toxic culture, right? A lot of times that can be us and we don't even realize it. So pay attention to those things, be positive and encouraging yourself. And a lot of times that rubs off on people, and you can affect your culture just by being different from how it typically is. So, Olivia, I knew this would be a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. For all those who are listening, I hope you've gotten a lot out of it too. And for those who have felt like, oh yeah, this really was a support group for me, I really needed this, I just encourage you, take care of yourself, okay? Go and find a place where you can be positive and where you can be supportive. And it's easy to come in and be that and be creative. You can be creative and express yourself in your job. So thank you again, Olivia. Till next time.
Yes.